All right, guys, we'll bring it to discussion. I've got a lot to say on this, obviously, just having fought in this war, but also spending the last couple of days talking to individuals that I've served with and know really well that are very closely connected to, if not hands-on, with this zero-unit program that this one individual was a part of. But let's keep it broad and talk about all the Afghans that were brought here after the fall of Kabul, the fall of Afghanistan. The numbers are here and there, around 80,000 through this Operation Allies Welcome. Alicia, I don't know how, because I pulled from the DHS website. This was basically stored. This was the press release that went out closer to 2021. 400 personnel were sent to 5 or 6 different countries to screen, I guess, what would have been 80,000 people. And they want us to believe they were properly screened and that we only brought in the people we could trust.
The lily pads, is that what they were referred to? Yes, and we know that our Nicole Parker, former FBI agent, said that she talked to other agents who volunteered to be a part of that process, of that vetting, and she says they were not vetted. That's very concerning. Now you have the Trump administration here doing its best to try to catch up as quickly as possible for the mistakes that were made and the things that were missed during the last administration and the chaos that brought these tens of thousands of people here. And then you start to think about what Dana Marie just said, that the focus now is on this suspect's past. So now if the administration is focusing on that, then they also have to focus on the tens and thousands of people who came across and their past.
You know, Tom, I guess what bothers me about this and the conversations I've had over the last couple of days is realizing, and I kind of understood this before, but I guess it's hitting home now. Americans sit with a sense of security when they live in this country, that we have this government intelligence apparatus, that if someone's planning a terrorist attack, we're just going to find who they are. And then you look at the resources necessary just to track these people. Just these people that were brought in, what it would take, the different agencies that would have to be involved if they were properly vetted and we knew where they all are and we kept an eye on them like we should. It's almost manpower impossible to do that.
Yeah, and even the way they refer to this vetting sometimes, it's very ambiguous the way they talk about it. We've been hearing this guy was vetted by the CIA, this guy was vetted by the CIA. It was very good to have on with John Scott. We had an official from the CIA, I don't remember his name, but I was watching him. He said he was vetted by the CIA to assist the CIA in a war zone.
There we go.
Yeah. He wasn't vetted to live in your neighborhood. So,
that's right.
So the CIA did not vet him to live in a neighborhood. Who did vet him? Some pencil pushers in the State Department, people who ran this program? We don't know. We should find out who vetted them and how they did it. Even if you have a very secure vetting process, essentially what it is a series of interviews. And so how well can you manage that? You're not going to get to 100% with this kind of thing. You're basically going by the trust of the people who are running these kind of programs. I don't even like the sound of the program, Allies Welcome. Allies are welcome to something from us if they were our allies and they assisted the United States, but they're not necessarily welcome to come and live in our neighborhoods.
They don't just live in our neighborhoods. If you look on the same website where I found this other information, they're getting SSI, they're getting temporary assistance for needy families, cash assistance, health insurance through Medicaid, and SNAP. And the person I talked to pointed out to me, listen, that doesn't last forever. At some point it goes away, and now they have to go work and pay taxes like everyone else, and some of them weren't prepared for that. They thought they were promised a free life here, and that's part of what makes them vulnerable to do something like this.
And the problem, too, Joey, when you point out so aptly that, they're said that they're going to live in your community, what this shows us is that it doesn't even matter if they live in your community or not, because some of them, like this particular suspect, Lochinwall, is willing to drive across the country from Washington State, leaving behind his 5 children and his wife in their apartment to commit a heinous attack on members of the National Guard in Washington, D.C., allegedly. And at the Farragut North Metro Station, which I'm sure you're familiar with, Washington, D.C., is only a couple blocks away from the White House. From the White House. Talk about premeditation and applauding the Department of Justice for pursuing this case to the absolute maximum ability of the law. The other thing that I would point out about questions about vetting here, too, is that something that the One Big Beautiful then bill, now law, Working Families Tax Act that we've been talking about, one benefit of this, as President Trump is talking about changes that are going to be made now, the amount of resources that it's increased to go through vetting and policing our borders to ensure that people are properly vetted. Now, we can talk about later, and I'm sure we will throughout the show, about what recourse and what processes are best appropriate here. But it does seem like the president is prepared to fully meet those needs with the resources that they require.
Yeah, you know, the one thing I want to point out, it's a 3-hour show. We're going to be here for a while. We're going to get deeper in this, but we're going to keep it at the kind of the 30,000-foot view for a moment and just talk about the immigration implications, because this is a president that was elected into office because Americans might not have known everything that was wrong, but they knew immigration wasn't right in this country, and some of the things that were happening to Americans were because of that. And now we have 2 National Guardsmen, one dead and one that may survive, directly linked to an immigration failure of the Biden administration. So this week's attack highlights the danger Americans still face thanks to 4 years of Biden's open border policy. So now President Trump is taking additional steps to keep our country safe, announcing a permanent pause on all migration from third world countries and ordering a full-scale review of every green card holder from a country of concern. These countries include Libya, Yemen, Iran. And the State Department has paused all visas for individuals traveling on Afghan passports. Under President Biden's Operation Allies welcome, nearly 90,000, as I said earlier, Afghan nationals arrived in the U.S., while a total of 190,000 have migrated since 2021. And now serious concerns are being raised over whether the vetting was thorough, as alleged by the Biden administration. Take a look.
So let's stop namby-pambing around with this, oh, he was vetted. There was no vetted. The welcome mat was thrown down. They even admitted that they short-circuited the vetting. What they did was they brought in 90,000 people into this country that were not vetted. They told us all the other immigrants were vetted. What do? Call the FBI in Afghanistan and say, gee, do you have anything on this guy?
Yeah, and just to explain the numbers there for a second, Alicia, so it's 90,000 that were kind of rushed in under Operation Allies Welcome. That was, 400 people go to these places and they start pumping them in. And then they changed the name of it. I can't remember. The second name was like Operation Enduring Allies or something like that. The first 90,000 that came in under that, they were promised 2 years, basically a 2-year residency here to figure things out, and then they had to apply and go through asylum.
Given money and jobs.
Exactly. Yes. But when they flipped the name of the operation, that 90,000 pretty much got a blanket of you can stay as long as you want. Now 100,000 more come in that were kind of sitting in wait in these other countries. So now we're talking nearly 200,000 people from a country that you have to understand Afghanistan. You're not Afghani, you're Pashtun, or you're, this sect of Islam, or you're in this tribe, or you have allegiance to this warlord. The reason why the country is such a mess is the Brits went and drew a line down the middle of a mountain chain and said, that's Afghanistan, that's Pakistan. Nothing culturally was different about the two areas. So now you have a back door that's always open. So there's no like inherent resolve within these people to adapt to or assimilate to a national identity. They're not going to assimilate into becoming Americans. So they're always going to be susceptible to someone getting a hold of them and saying, hey, for $100,000, we'll quit killing your family in Afghanistan if you'll go kill some National Guard soldiers.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because this has been said a lot, and when people say it, they get accused of racism. We don't know who they are, and that's just a fact. We don't know how long this suspect may have been harboring ill will toward the United States. Did that start when he was on the ground working next to the CIA, or is it something that developed? I also feel like this administration has a challenge that's really fits in 2 different columns. One is we're coming up on a year since Trump retook office, and he was faced with and inherited a huge immigration problem. So what did his administration do? They attacked it right away. They had to go after it. But as the layers keep getting peeled away, we see the problems that have come with Afghanistan. J.D. Vance called it a long time ago. Now, then you get to number 2. Now the cabinet is being accused by critics of actually being the problem because they're trying to fix the problem, and also, again, being accused of racism when we have people here, we don't understand their past thoroughly.
Tom, the first time the president tried to address this issue, they said he did a Muslim ban. And he was quick to say, there's a couple of countries here that aren't predominantly Muslim. I really could care less if it were a Muslim ban or not, because last I checked, there isn't radical Hindus trying to kill us in the name of their religion. There's only one religion in this world that has been the vehicle to attack our country on 9/11 and sustain a 20-year war. It's not a war against Islam. It's a war against radical Islamic terrorist groups that are named and organized and doing their fighting in the name of a religion. And so if you have to go and say, hey, any country that is predominantly Muslim that has these groups working in it, we're going to pause your migration until we can better vet who comes here. I don't know that that's an inherently bad thing anyway.
Well, he's also, I remember he was accused of racism because of some people talked about, they overheard him saying, why are we letting people in from these countries? There was like some kind of epithet he said, this was years ago, like S-hole countries, whatever. Yeah. And they said, look what he said about these terrible countries. And then he defended, he said, what are you talking about? These are terrible countries. Terrible things happen in these countries. So whether it's Muslim or not, some of the countries on the list, you have Congo, Libya, Haiti, there are bad things that happen in these countries. So there are people that are there that they are, they're under threat, their life, their freedom, there's dictators, everything else. The question is, what do you do for them? Do you invite them to come and live in your country? And a lot of people say, no, we shouldn't be doing that.
Well, it's not, I guess I spoke to a guy that's been with the CIA for a long time. He's not in the CIA. He works adjacent to them now. And the way he explained it to me was that the CIA is going to get a bad rap for this, as they should. I mean, you take responsibility for the things that happen. But he said, listen, this zero-unit program saved a bunch of American lives. And by the number, like every single one of them, said, no, we're not training these people to come to our country. We're training them to fight in their country like we did in Iraq, and they stayed there. And Iraq's a lot better place than Afghanistan is today. They all recommended against this, but it was the Biden administration's administrators, the top-level folks that came in with some bleeding heart saying, no, we have to take care of these people, maybe just to cover up how bad and messy the Afghanistan withdrawal was to begin with.
I think the problem with bringing people here to this country is really laid out in this case that we're talking about, because it was just earlier this year when this suspect was then again re-vetted to receive his asylum, his permission to stay here from the Trump administration after they inherited this from the Biden administration, going to the point where you bring over someone that might have a problematic history, and it's still not going to be uncovered despite multiple attempts to vet them. There might be a problem there, and it's going to be difficult to uncover. But to your point, Joey, I do have questions about that. When we are engaged, and maybe you could talk more about this, foreign combat, and we do rely on allies overseas to help us with translation services or to be so-called fixers and helping us navigate terrain, and they put themselves at risk. I think one of the big questions is, how much protection should the U.S. then provide those folks? And that is the larger question here. We obviously have a few very bad examples of folks that did not deserve to be in this country. Yeah. But by and large, I'm sure on the other side, there are examples of folks that would say these are people that want to be American and believe in the American spirit, want to support the Constitution, and they're willing to work toward that. How do you kind of thread that needle? And I think that's a big question that we're all going to navigate and work through.
Yeah, I'm going to break it down what we call in the Marine Corps Barney style for you. The folks that fought alongside us in Afghanistan didn't fight because they love America or they love Americans. They fought because we put a bunch of cash in their pocket and they didn't have access to such things. We paid them for their allegiance. What we should have done and did do in Iraq was continue to pay them to fight the good fight. It's the cheapest way to keep American lives safe. By bringing them all here, what we've done is allowed them to come here, and at the moment they are vulnerable, that their families are threatened in Afghanistan, that they can't make ends meet in America, because it's not always easy unless you know what you're doing and you're working hard enough. The moment that we do that, somebody can call them up and say, we'll give you more money to go kill a bunch of National Guardsmen. That's what the Biden administration did to us, and that's what fighting 20 years in Afghanistan got us. And I hope the American people vote knowing that.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.